This final session examines what needs to be done to achieve the roads asset management vision, what the important roles are that need to be fulfilled, and proposes an indicative roadmap of actions that could be carried out over the next 3 to 5 years to achieve road asset management maturity. There are a number of important success factors that need to be in place for roads asset management planning and the implementation of roads asset management planning to succeed. These include a commitment to roads asset management on the part of senior managers within a roads organisation, and a readiness to adopt roads asset management at the institutional level. There needs to be arrangements in place for managing roads asset management and for governing roads asset management, and that needs to include a team for managing the implementation and operation of roads asset management, and ideally would include groups of users as well to feedback their experiences. The commitment to roads asset management needs to be a long-term commitment, and it needs to comprise, as well as endorsement from senior managers, it needs to include the resources, both financial, staffing and others, to ensure that roads asset management planning can succeed. A capability in roads asset management needs to be developed for a roads organisation, and in order to achieve that, there needs to be appropriate software, and there needs to be training of the users and the other important stakeholders and managers. There needs to be a regime in place to ensure that the data that is required for roads asset management is collected or procured if it's going to be provided by third-party providers, and then that data is managed and kept up to date, and the quality of that data is assured. There needs to be appropriate hardware, roads asset management software, and the communications infrastructure to support that. And perhaps most importantly, the roads organisation needs to develop business processes based on roads asset management planning principles in order to use the information provided by the roads asset management system. Examples of these processes might be proposed processes for developing and approving a forward program of works, processes for determining appropriate levels of budgets and for allocating those budgets to different assets, and processes for bidding for funding. And also processes related to setting targets for service levels and for monitoring achievement of those targets. This is an indicative roadmap for roads asset management planning. This needs to be developed further. I've shown this as an indication of what might be achieved over a 5-year period to take a typical roads asset management planning organisation whose capabilities are at the basic level, at the starting point, and again, that's not unusual, that's a typical scenario, to take that through to advanced roads asset management planning over 5 years. That roadmap will include items such as developing the policy and the strategy for roads asset management planning, setting up the organisation and the governance for roads asset management planning, developing a strategy, putting a plan in place for training, developing and implementing performance management framework, which includes KPIs and certain levels of service and targets, and then putting into place the regime for collecting condition and other roads asset management data, and for keeping that data and periodically recollecting or updating the data. There needs to be a plan in place for putting in place the appropriate software for roads asset management. And then once that software is there, the various life cycle models and works planning tools and the programming tools and prioritization tools need to be developed. There also needs to be various reporting and analysis tools related to planning investments, valuing the assets, and reporting at the strategic business level. And there needs to be appropriate mechanisms in place for managing risk associated with roads asset management. I've identified a number of typical but important roles related to roads asset management. What I've done on this slide is to relate those to the various competencies that are identified in the PIARC Roads Asset Management Planning Manual in order to give an indication of what would need to be developed to support roads asset management planning. An important role is the asset management champion, who will be somebody at a more senior level that will be able to drive roads asset management implementation through and get the support of the organisation. Will be able to champion the principles of roads asset management planning. They will work closely with the Roads Asset Management Board typically, but also be somebody at a more hands-on level, and this may well be a full-time role, or at least will comprise a good part of their time, somebody to actually manage and coordinate the implementation of roads asset management planning. They would typically be supported and work closely with a steering group for roads asset management planning, who would typically comprise both asset specialists and other key people, both on the financial planning side of the organisation and the engineering side of the organisation, as well as other key individuals from these roles set out below. I think it's worthwhile saying as we talk through these roles that they're not necessarily all one individual. Some of those roles could be taken by the same individual. They could actually be shared between people, and some of them are actually groups of people rather than individuals anyway. Somebody will need to take responsibility for managing the roads asset management software and for dealing with the implementation and the operation of that. And similarly, somebody will need to be responsible for managing the data within the RAMs, making sure that's well specified, ensuring that there's a regime in place for collecting and updating it, and taking responsibility for the quality of that data. A related role is somebody that will be responsible for data collection and surveys and managing those surveys, and they will be supported by a team that's actually carrying out the data collection. There may be a risk manager role for roads asset management, and somebody will need to be responsible for the compiling and delivery of works programs. There may also be a separate performance manager that deals with the publication of KPIs and manages the achieving of those in relation to targets. And somebody will need to take responsibility for training related to roads asset management planning and for developing capabilities for the staff and for the organisation involved in roads asset management planning. So an important part of developing an asset management policy and a strategy is for a roads organisation to understand where they're trying to get to in relation to roads asset management. We term this a roads asset management vision, but it's important that the roads organisation delivering roads asset management takes ownership of that vision. So it's not something that UKNIAF can draft for you. But what I've done here is to include a few examples of what a vision statement for roads asset management planning might look like. And it would be useful to get feedback on those to see if any of those is relevant, and from that to use for FIRMA to develop its own vision for roads asset management. you.